She paid just $5 for a limping, broken German shepherd no one wanted. They called it a mistake until the dog saved a child, revealed a past of heroism, and left behind a legacy that brought an entire town to tears. Sometimes, the ones we rescue are the ones who rescue us first. The wind howled over the hills of Ridgewood, tugging at the tattered curtains of an old farmhouse nestled on the edge of a forgotten road. It was the kind of town where people locked up their stories and buried them deep, until one little girl, with $5 crumpled and a heart full of hope, decided otherwise. 10-year-old Emily Rose Carter wasn't like most kids. While others her age begged for iPads and new shoes, Emily saved her allowance in a glass jar labeled Someday. Nobody ever asked what someday meant. Not her parents, not her teachers. Only her grandfather, Pop, ever came close to guessing. "You're waiting for something special, aren't you, Bug?" he'd ask with a smile. She'd nod silently every time. That something special appeared one overcast afternoon. Emily and Pop were returning from the feed store when Pop took a detour to check on an old tractor he'd loaned to a man named Gibbs. They pulled up to a weather-beaten property where weeds choked the fence line and rust ate through everything it touched. While Pop knocked on the front door, Emily wandered toward the back. That's when she saw him. Near a sagging shed, in a patch of cold mud, lay a German shepherd, thin, trembling, his fur matted with dirt and dried blood. A short chain clinked around his neck, tied lazily to a broken fence post. His eyes, dull amber, met Emily's for the briefest second. No growl, no bark, just surrender. "Pop," she whispered, tugging his sleeve moments later. "There's a dog." Pop followed her around the shed. When he saw the shepherd, his mouth tightened. "Looks like he's been through hell." Gibbs came lumbering out, wiping grease from his hands. "Darn thing's been useless ever since he got hit by a truck 2 winters ago," he said with a shrug. "Can't run right, eats too much, just haven't gotten around to—" He didn't finish the sentence. "How much?" Emily asked suddenly. Gibbs laughed. "You want him? $5 and he's yours. Save me the trouble." Pop turned. But Emily was already digging into her pocket, pulling out 5 carefully folded, wrinkled dollar bills. Her hands shook slightly as she handed them over. "It's all I've got," she said. Gibbs grunted and took the money without a second glance. "Suit yourself." That night, the dog came home with them, riding quietly in the bed of Pop's pickup, wrapped in an old blanket. Emily named him Shadow, because that's what he looked like, a shadow of what he used to be. Shadow didn't make a sound. Not when they cut the chain, not when they cleaned his wounds, not when Emily tucked him into the barn with straw bedding, fresh water, and 2 pieces of turkey she saved from lunch. For the first time in his life, someone looked at him with love. Pop wasn't sure what to make of it. "He ain't ever gonna be a real pet, Em. He's too far gone." Emily simply whispered, "He just needs time." The first few nights were quiet. Shadow didn't eat much. He flinched at sudden movements. Sometimes he stared into the distance like he was trying to remember something. But he never barked, never growled. Every morning before school, Emily brought him breakfast, soft food warmed in the microwave, and every night she read to him from her favorite book, The Secret Garden. Before you scroll away. My heart honestly sank when I saw that 98% of people watch my videos, but don't subscribe. If this video made you feel even a little something, please consider subscribing. It might be just 1 click for you, but it means the world to me. Shadow would lift his head slowly, just enough to watch her eyes move across the page. And sometimes, when she stopped, he'd let out a low exhale, like he wanted her to keep going. Pop watched from the barn door one evening, arms crossed, eyes damp. "That girl's gonna break if that dog doesn't make it," he mumbled to himself. But something in Shadow began to change. One morning, as Emily leaned down to place his bowl beside him, he touched her hand, just barely, with his nose. She froze. He did it again, a little more confident this time. And then, the next night, as she read aloud beneath a hanging bulb that buzzed with moths, Shadow wagged his tail. Just once. Emily gasped. "Did you just—" Shadow blinked slowly. That night she placed her old stuffed raccoon beside him, the one she never let anyone touch. "He's good at listening," she told him, "but he gets scared too, like you." In the coming days, Emily's world revolved around Shadow. She taught him how to sit with soft commands and reward bites. She washed him gently with warm cloths. She even wrote a letter to the vet asking if he could help her dog walk better. "His leg drags a little," she wrote, "but his heart doesn't." Then, one afternoon after school, Pop found her in the barn with tears in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked, concerned. "I think," she sniffled, "I think he smiled at me today." Pop chuckled and wiped her cheek with his calloused thumb. "Then I think we're all in trouble." But no one, not even Emily, could have predicted what Shadow was about to do next. Something that would leave an entire town in awe. Something that would uncover a secret buried in dust and silence for years. Something that would turn Emily's $5 dream into a miracle that would echo far beyond Ridgewood. Shadow was no longer just a stray. In just a few weeks, he had become the soul of the Carter farm. Though he still limped, his steps had purpose. He followed Emily to the henhouse each morning, sat beside her as she did homework on the porch, and waited outside her window each night until she came down with a blanket and a book. But Pop was the first to notice something strange. One evening, while they watched a war movie on an old boxy television in the den, the sound of helicopters thudding overhead filled the room. Shadow, curled by the fire, suddenly stiffened. His ears perked, his body stilled. Then, to everyone's surprise, he rose slowly and positioned himself between the TV and the family, his posture straight, alert. Emily looked up from her coloring book. "What is he doing?" Pop narrowed his eyes. "That's military stance." The next morning it happened again. Emily dropped a metal bucket, the clatter echoing off the barn walls. Before she could bend to pick it up, Shadow leapt between her and the sound, low to the ground, scanning for threats. Pop said nothing, but the gears in his mind were turning. Later that week, Emily was in the yard playing with a stick when she jokingly shouted, "Bang!" and pointed it like a toy gun at Shadow. Without hesitation, the dog collapsed dramatically, motionless. Emily gasped. Did you see that, Pop? I didn't teach him that." Pop stepped closer, his voice quiet. "That ain't no trick you learn in a backyard." Emily looked at Shadow with awe. "Do you think he used to belong to someone important?" Pop nodded slowly. "I think he was someone important." That night, while Emily slept with a book across her chest, Pop sat in the barn with a flashlight, studying the dog. He ran his hands gently along Shadow's neck, feeling beneath the fur. That's when he found it. A small bump just under the skin near the shoulder blade. "A chip," he whispered. He didn't tell Emily right away. He didn't want to get her hopes up. Instead, the next morning, Pop called in a favor from an old friend, Dr. Harriet Bowen, a retired veterinarian who ran a tiny clinic on the edge of the next town. When they arrived, Shadow was unusually calm, almost like he knew where they were going. Dr. Bowen greeted them with warm eyes and silver hair pulled into a ponytail. "Let's have a look at this mystery boy." She scanned the chip, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen beeped softly. "Oh," she breathed. "What?" Pop asked. Dr. Bowen turned the screen so they could see. His name's not Shadow. According to this, he's officially Sergeant K9, Unit ID Bravo 7, former U.S. military service dog, declared missing in action 3 years ago. Emily's mouth fell open. But how did he end up with Gibbs? Dr. Bowen frowned. Sometimes injured dogs get left behind in chaos, especially after explosions or attacks. If a private contractor found him, they could have taken him without reporting it. Poor thing's been living in the shadows ever since. Emily turned to her dog. No, her hero, with new eyes. You were a soldier? She whispered. Shadow tilted his head slightly, as if answering. Pop cleared his throat. Why didn't anyone look for him? They did, Bowen replied. But if the chip was damaged, it wouldn't have responded until now. When they returned to the farm, Emily couldn't stop staring at him. Not with fear, not with sadness, but with wonder. You protected people, she said as she brushed his coat that evening. You gave everything, and they thought you were gone. Shadow leaned against her, letting out a soft grunt. I found you for a reason, she whispered, and I promise I won't let go. News spread fast in small towns. The story leaked after Doctor. Bowen made a quiet call to someone she knew in the Veterans Affairs office, and soon the world would know what the little girl had done. But first came the storm. It was a week later, and the sky turned black by noon. The town's weather radio crackled out warnings: wind, hail, flash flooding. The Carter family braced themselves as the wind began to scream through the trees like a train. Emily rushed to the barn, panicked. Shadow, come on, boy! But Shadow wasn't inside. Lightning cracked. Rain pelted the earth in angry sheets. Pop ran after her. Emily, get back to the house! I won't leave him, she screamed through the wind. Then, through the chaos, they heard it. Barking. From the edge of the orchard, Shadow appeared, dragging something in his mouth. It was small, wriggling. Emily gasped. The McCallan's puppy. The neighbor's missing golden retriever pup. Shadow had found him. He dropped the pup gently at Emily's feet, then turned, ears back, toward the woods. He barked again, short, urgent. Something else is out there, Pop said. He's trying to tell us. Emily's heart pounded. What if someone's in trouble? Pop looked into Shadow's eyes. Show me, boy. Without another word, Shadow took off into the trees, Pop right behind him with a flashlight, Emily trailing close. They didn't know it then, but what they'd find would change everything. Again. The forest was dark and wild, wind thrashing the trees like angry waves against a cliff. Emily clutched Pop's coat tightly, struggling to keep up as they followed Shadow deeper into the woods. Rain soaked their clothes, mud swallowed their boots. But Shadow moved with purpose, fast but careful, pausing every few feet to look back, making sure they followed. What is it, boy? Pop shouted over the roar of the storm. What are you trying to show us? Suddenly, Shadow veered left into a narrow clearing, one they hadn't walked through in years. The air felt heavier here, like it remembered things people had forgotten. That's when they saw it. A truck, half sunken into the mud, its front wheels angled sharply into a tree, the windshield shattered. Steam rose from the hood, flickering faintly in the dim light of Pop's flashlight. Emily's heart dropped. There's someone in there! Shadow circled the vehicle, barking with urgency. Inside, barely conscious, was Tommy Blake, a local teen from down the road. He'd gone missing that morning, and everyone thought he'd taken the back roads into town. No one expected he'd end up here. Pop sprang into action. Emily, stay with Shadow. He wrenched open the driver's side door and pulled Tommy into his arms. The boy groaned faintly. Tried to swerve. Dear. You're lucky he found you, Pop muttered. Real lucky. Shadow stood over Tommy protectively, tail stiff, as if guarding him from the rain itself. They carried the boy back to the house. By the time they returned, neighbors were already gathered near the barn, the storm drawing people together like moths to flickering lanterns. Word of Shadow's rescue spread instantly, first whispered between soaked lips, then shouted with awe. Emily wrapped a dry towel around her hero and kissed the top of his head. "You saved him, Shadow. You knew." Pop stood in the doorway, stunned. "That dog's got instincts no one taught. That's more than training. That's memory." But this night would give more than just one miracle. The next morning, under calmer skies, an unfamiliar black SUV pulled into their gravel drive. Two men in uniform stepped out, not police but military, clean-cut with brass pins and clipped voices. Emily ran to Shadow's side, protective. "Who are they?" The older of the two men approached slowly. "We're here because of Bravo 7, he said, his voice steady but soft. "That's this dog's registered call sign." Shadow stood, tense, but didn't growl. Instead, he sat and stared straight into the man's eyes, recognizing him. The younger man stepped forward. "I can't believe it. Sergeant Bravo 7. We thought you were gone for good." Pop crossed his arms. "You lost him?" The officer sighed. "During a transport run overseas, there was an ambush. An IED went off. 3 of our units were hit. Bravo 7 disappeared in the chaos. We believed he was KIA." Emily knelt beside her dog. "He wasn't. He just needed to find his way back." The officer looked down at her, then at Shadow. "He saved more than a dozen soldiers in his time. Trained for explosives, recon, search and rescue. He was one of the best." Emily's voice was small. "Is he yours again now?" There was a long pause. The man knelt down, meeting her at eye level. "He served his time. If you're willing, he can stay right here. With you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," the officer said. "But we'd like to offer him something too." Emily blinked. "What?" The men exchanged a glance. "An official retirement ceremony. He deserves that. A recognition of service and of survival." Emily smiled, hugging Shadow tight. "Then he'll do it. We'll do it." Shadow licked her cheek, tail wagging gently. A few days later, the small town gathered again, this time for something they'd never expected to see, a military-style retirement ceremony for a dog. The high school football field became the venue. Veterans from across the state showed up in full-dress uniform. Kids made signs. Someone brought a banner, "Welcome home, Sergeant Shadow." Emily stood in front of the crowd, holding Shadow's leash in one hand and a microphone in the other. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I didn't know who he was when I paid those $5. I just knew he was hurting, and I knew he needed someone. But what I didn't realize was how much I needed him too." She paused, voice cracking slightly. "They say I rescued him, but the truth is, Shadow rescued me. He showed me that pain doesn't mean broken, and that just because something's forgotten doesn't mean it's gone." Behind her, the officers presented Shadow with a small medal, fastened gently to his collar. Pop stood beside her, pride in his eyes. And Shadow? He stood tall, tail wagging, ears up. No longer a forgotten stray or a wounded soldier, but a hero, fully seen, fully home. But just when the town thought the story was over, something else was about to unfold. A mystery hidden deeper than anyone imagined, one that would send Emily and Shadow on a path no one expected. The ceremony had ended, but its echo lingered for days, on porches, in coffee shops, even whispered across the schoolyard. Everyone knew Shadow now. Everyone loved him, but none more than Emily, whose life had changed in ways even she couldn't yet explain. It was a week later, just after supper, when Emily sat in the barn with Shadow lying beside her. She ran her fingers gently across his new collar, the one the officers had given him during the retirement ceremony. Her thumb caught on a metal tag, one that hadn't been there before. Frowning, she turned it over. At first, it just looked like numbers and letters, but Pop, who'd come in with a mason jar of fresh lemonade, recognized it instantly. "That's a military cipher code," he muttered, taking the tag from her and holding it to the light. "Encrypted, but not random. That's a location code." Emily's heart skipped. "A location? Like a place?" Pop nodded. "And not just anywhere. This is pointing right back here, to our woods. About 3 miles deeper than we've ever gone." She looked at Shadow. He was already up, tail still, eyes alert. He knew. "Should we go now?" she whispered. Pop hesitated, then nodded. "We'll wait until first light. Safer that way." That night, Emily barely slept. At dawn, she was already dressed, backpack packed, boots laced tight. Shadow stood at the door, ears perked, ready. Together, with Pop and a flashlight, they trekked into the dense forest, deeper than any trail, until the trees grew so thick the sun barely reached the mossy ground. Shadow guided them, nose low, steps steady. He wasn't wandering. He was remembering. After nearly 2 hours, Shadow stopped. He sniffed at the base of an old oak tree, then began to dig. Pop leaned in. "What in the—" A moment later, Shadow unearthed a rusted metal box, its latch half-eaten by time. Emily knelt and pried it open. Inside was a bundle of letters tied in red string, and beneath them, a photo. It showed a man in fatigues, crouched next to a younger Shadow, both smiling. On the back, scribbled in a fading hand, were 4 words. "Find her. Protect her." Emily's eyes filled. What does it mean?" Pop gently unfolded one of the letters. His breath caught. "It's addressed to a girl named Rachel Hollis, dated almost 20 years ago." He paused. "Rachel Hollis. That was your mother's maiden name." Emily looked up in shock. "My mom?" Pop nodded slowly. "These letters were from a soldier she once knew. Said he had to leave for service, promised he'd find his way back, said he'd send someone, to protect her if he didn't." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. He meant Shadow. Shadow leaned into her side gently, as if confirming it. Pop turned the photo over again. "This soldier, I knew him. Jake Carter. He trained dogs, K9 units, back when I was a young man. Your mom talked about him once, said he was the only man she ever truly loved before she met your father." Emily looked at the box, the letters, the photo, and Shadow. He didn't make it back, but Shadow did. Pop's voice was quiet. "And now he's here with you, like Jake promised." For a long moment the forest was silent. Just the wind weaving through the trees, the rustle of memories, the sound of time catching up to itself. Shadow sat beside the box, calm and still, as though he'd completed his final mission. But it wasn't over yet. That evening, Emily showed the letters to her mother. At first she didn't say a word. She just stared at the handwriting, her hands trembling. Then the tears came. Silent, steady, grief laced with wonder. "I thought he was gone forever," she whispered. "But he kept his promise?" Emily wrapped her arms around her mother. "Through him," she said, nodding at Shadow, "he found us again." After that night, things changed in ways no one could have imagined. The letters were turned into a feature article by a national news outlet. A journalist who had once worked with military dog units flew in to interview Emily, Pop, and even some of Jake Carter's surviving squad members. They told stories about Bravo 7, about his loyalty, about how he once dragged a wounded man out of a firefight under sniper fire, refusing to leave him behind. And when they were done, The world had heard the tale of the $5 dog who found a forgotten family. One day, a stranger came to the farm. A quiet woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and worn combat boots. She carried a cane and moved slowly, but her eyes were sharp. She introduced herself simply. "My name is Captain Lena Rhodes. I served with Jake Carter. I was there the day Bravo 7 disappeared." She looked at Shadow. "When that blast hit, I saw Jake whisper something to the dog before it all went dark. I never knew what. Now I do." Emily led her to the barn, where Shadow was lying in the sun. When Lena knelt beside him, Shadow didn't move, just looked up, then gently laid his head in her lap. She laughed softly, tears in her eyes. "Still remember me, huh?" They sat together for a while in silence, honoring the man who trained him, the promise he made, and the dog who kept it. When she stood to leave, Captain Rhodes looked at Emily and smiled. "He was never just a pet. He was a guardian. Yours now." But still, a mystery remained. How Shadow had survived alone, injured, separated by oceans and time. What Emily didn't know, what Shadow was about to reveal, was that the final piece of the story hadn't been uncovered yet, and it would shake everything they thought they knew. Weeks passed since the letters were found. The media slowly quieted, but the town didn't forget. Shadow became a local legend, his photo hanging in the diner, the school library, even on a billboard that read, "Bravery has 4 legs." But something had changed in Shadow. He grew quieter, slower. At first, Emily thought it was just age catching up, but one morning she found him staring toward the woods for hours, unmoving, like something or someone was calling. Pop watched him too. "Sometimes soldiers know when their duty's done," he said softly. Emily refused to believe it. "He's just tired. He's not done. Not yet." But then came the storm. It was sudden, fierce, and violent. Lightning cracked across the sky, and winds tore through the valley like fists. Trees bent. Power lines fell. The town scrambled. Emily's family rushed to prepare. Shutters fastened, lanterns lit. Shadow stood by the door, not frightened, not anxious, waiting. Then it happened. A car skidded on the wet road outside, tires shrieking, headlights spinning into the ditch. Emily screamed. Before she could even move, Shadow was gone, burst through the screen door, down the gravel path, faster than she'd ever seen him move. Pop tried to grab her, but she was already running too, soaked and breathless. The ditch had filled with water from the flash flood. Inside the overturned car was the boy from next door, Matthew, the shy second grader who always gave Shadow treats over the fence. The water was rising fast. Shadow didn't hesitate. He leapt into the torrent, barking, grabbing at the boy's coat, pulling with all his strength. His old body strained. His muscles shook. But he didn't stop. Emily reached the edge just as the door gave way, water pouring in. Shadow had the boy by the sleeve, dragging him toward the slope. Pop arrived and helped haul the child to safety. But when Emily looked back, Shadow was gone. "No!" she screamed, plunging into the current. Pop grabbed her. "Em, stop! You'll be swept away!" The water tore through the ditch like a roaring beast. They searched until dawn. They found him just past the bend, curled beneath a fallen tree, half submerged, but peaceful. Emily fell to her knees, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. She cradled him, whispered over and over, "Please don't go. Please, I still need you." But Shadow had completed his last mission. He saved one more life. The vet confirmed it was his heart. The effort, the storm, it was too much for his old body. But there was no pain, only purpose. He passed with loyalty in his blood, duty in his bones, and love wrapped around him like armor. The town came together to honor him once more. They buried him on the highest hill overlooking the farm, under the shade of the old sycamore. Children left flowers. Veterans saluted. Emily placed the metal tag, the one from his collar, beneath a small stone. It read, "Bravo 7. He never stopped serving." And beside it, Emily laid a letter, written in her own hand. "Dear Shadow, you never asked for anything. You just gave. You taught me that broken things aren't useless. They're just waiting for someone to believe in them again. You were never just a dog. You were my guard, my healer, my hero. They say I rescued you, but the truth is, you rescued me first. I will love you forever." Emily's seasons passed. Emily grew, went to school, learned how to train dogs. She volunteered with local shelters, became a vet tech, wrote a children's book called The Dog Who Remembered. She told Shadow's story at every school, every town fair, every military reunion. One day, years later, a woman knocked at her door, holding the hand of a little girl. "I read your book," she said, smiling softly. "My daughter, she's had a hard time. She doesn't speak much. But when she saw the pictures of Shadow, she smiled. For the first time in months." She knelt beside the girl. "Would it be all right if she met some of the dogs you work with?" Emily smiled and opened the gate. "Of course, come meet Hope." From the barn came a young German shepherd, ears perked, eyes gentle.